Okay, here is 2020's History Unit 1, Paper 1. Right, so let's have a go at it. Which of the following best describe the traditional stories of Norse history? These would be the sagas, like the Greenland Saga, the Saga of Eric the Red, etc. 2. The archaeological excavation of Lonsdale Meadows provides evidence of the existence of Viking settlement in Greenland. It wasn't in Greenland. Precise location of the Viking settlement in Vinland. Okay. Existence of a permanent Viking settlement in Greenland, or existence of a Finland was really a type of fictional area, but it was normally located within Newfoundland, therefore. So we're using Newfoundland. 3. Which of the following activities was not a feature of indigenous mainland American societies? Mainland American societies, right? They did not worship one god. They were polytheistic. 4. Which of the following situations provided evidence of contact between Europeans and West Africans during the 15th century? Right, so let us have a look at this. Europeans and Africans within the 15th century. The 15th century means the 1400s, right? Boy, I can't even write. The 1400s, and this would be the arrival of the Portuguese at Elmina, right, on the West African coast. 5. Which of the following routes did the Scandinavian explorers take to get to North America? So they went to Iceland, then to wait, that is wrong. They went to Greenland last, so it's Norway, then to Iceland, then to Greenland. 6. Which of the following which of the centuries did the Portuguese first trade with the Africans, right? So this would have been within the 15th century, which shows the 1400s, right? 7. The transfer of food, plants, and animals from one continent to another as a result of the European age of exploration was referred to as the Columbian Exchange. 8. The Spanish expedition to Mexico was mainly in search of... Was it the kingdom of Presta John? Was it new source of wealth, new land for cultivation, or converts to the Christian faith? So their expedition to Mexico were probably looking for new sources of wealth. Right? So we have that there. Some persons have probably contradictions, are looking for the kingdom of Prester John. Not sure if that would be the best thing there, right? But usually for new wealth. So they saw that the islands in the Caribbean were really lackluster in the wealth that they were looking for. So we're in search of new wealth, and with this while going in search of new wealth, right, then they would have found the Aztec confederacies, right, and the Mayan people, or what was left of the Mayan people, and found people to convert to Christian faith. And after they developed their monopolized system into a type of agrarian society, then they'll start to look for new lands for cultivation. But mainly wealth was really one of the reasons there. 9. Cortez's military campaign in Central America between 1519 and 1521 was successful mainly because of countermeasures by the Aztec were undermined by unexpected illness. Okay. Spanish forces outnumbered those of lies. Spaniards destroyed the religious images of the Aztecs. Why would that be? Military headquarters were established in Veracruz. It would be most likely because of illness. Right? So they have really two major causes that I would have listed out. The illness would have depleted Aztec population by a lot, right? Even though their population was depleted, they would still outnumber the Spaniards, and they were severely weakened, right? And also we have to look at it at the Aztec Confederacy. Really, well, I call it a confederacy. They exist in a confederation, right? With the other Aztec states around Zampungo, right, and Texcoco lakes, if we remember those. And they lived by their confederacy survived by subjugation. So the persons that they subjugated would have actually incited civil wars within the Aztec confederacy, right? So that would have been one of the main reasons, and I think that illness is the best example for this one, right? So remember, if there are any questions that you have disputes with or want to dispute, right, then you can obviously go down to the comment section, tell me what number, what answer, and the reason why you would think that would be the better answer, right? So number 10, which of the following was not a method of resistance used by the indigenous people against the Spaniards? All right, payment of tribute. Why would that be resistance? The main purpose of the encomienda system introduced by the Spaniards was, so the main purpose of the encomienda system was to provide a pool of labor for the Spaniards. So we have that there. Number 12, an example of the divide and rule strategy used by Cortes to conquer Mexico was the systematic capture of villages. No. Capture, no. Formation of alliances with local tribes. So looking at the different local tribes like the Tlaxcala that you would form all our alliances with, right? Sorry about that. I can't speak English at this moment. Right? Bartholomew de las Casas, right, is associated with the encouragement of campaign against the encomienda system, right? So we have that. 14, the Spanish crown's effort to end abuses against indigenous peoples of Hispaniola after 1542 failed because most of the indigenous people have already died out. Okay, the encomendera class had become too powerful. Not true. They have become powerful, but too powerful for the Spanish crown. Interesting. The governments were unaware of the policy to protect the Amerindians. No, they were aware, just like many of the viceroys within Central America were very aware, but they didn't, right? The missionaries were, So I think it would be mostly because of this. By 1542, many of the indigenous persons have already died out, right? So the efforts to end the abuses against indigenous people, it couldn't be scaled back at this point, right? So, I think so. It could be cropped up to B. So if you're saying that B could be a better answer for it, go down into the chat section, the comment section, and tell us why. 15, the Audiencias were established by the Spaniards in the Americas too, or the Audiencias, right? So act as a Supreme Court of the Indies. So they would be the audiences. So I think they would act as the courts for the Indies. So they could be stated to be an appendage of the Casa de la Contratación, right? If you could remember that. So let's look at this. 16, which of the following was or were used by enslaved women as methods of resistance? Practicing birth control, poisoning their masters, and prolonging lactation period. I believe that all of them make sense, right? Why? Birth control, they did practice birth control. They didn't, many of them died from birth control practices because they weren't as sanitary, right? Poisoning their masters, they tried their best to poison the ones who had the courage, they did, right? Who could see that? Prolonging lactation period, they try to prolong their lactation period, right? Because when they're on the lactation period, they were exempt from work and those type of things. So they actually try to stay, look as if they're in the lactation period for as long as possible, right? Some persons may try to rule out 2, right? So please leave a comment on that if you're trying to rule out 2. Create some meaningful discussions there. 17. West Indian planters gave provision grounds to the enslaved mainly to ensure that the land was cultivated, decreasing the planters' food expenses. So that was one of the main reasons of giving them provision growth, so they don't have to give them food, so they will make their own food, right? 18, which of the following statements most accurately relates to chattel slavery in the Caribbean? Right, so chattel slavery speaks about the legal ownership of a person. Alright, so let's look at this. The enslaved worked for days, alright, and had weekends off, okay. Plantation owners were prohibited from separating families, interesting. Laws protected the enslaved from harsh forms of punishment, or the enslaved were considered property or chattel. 19. Which of the following periods of weakness among whites were used by enslaved Africans to stage revolts in the 18th and early 19th centuries? These would be Christmas celebrations, right? So we have that there. 20. Which of the following statements best explains why more women than men survived the Middle Passage? Women had fewer. Okay, let's look at this. So this is not that bad. Women had fewer restrictions. Interesting. Women were less likely to rebel during the passage. Okay. The immune system of women were more resistant. There's no way to really prove that. And women could better withstand the effects of shocks and pain. We can't really prove that like that. So it comes down to A or B. Women had fewer restrictions placed on them, or women were least likely to rebel, right? So persons would have could have a contest between these two answers, right? I would probably believe that they were less likely to rebel than the men, more so than A. But if you have A, remember to start a discussion in the comments. 21. Under the Barbados Slave Code of 1661, masters had the responsibility to keep enslaved families together, protect the enslaved from cruel overseers, set standards for enslaved housing and diet, or provide enslaved with one set of clothing per year. We believe that this slave law gave us, what would it be? Alright, so it could be D, provide the enslaved with one set of clothing per year, based off of that. Right? Remember, if there's an issue with it, comments. 22. Which of the following leaders reportedly gave the signal to begin the revolt in Saint-Domingue? Right? It would have been Dirty Bootman. The Haitian Revolution was fought mainly because enslaved people wanted their freedom. Alright? Enslaved people wanted their freedom. So we had that there. 24. Which of the following factors best accounts for the success of the Haitian Revolution? Alright, so what would be it? Use of sophisticated weapons? No. Rituals? Okay. Assistance rendered by the blacks? Not really. Okay, we're looking at hilly terrain. So guerrilla warfare and as well as the climate played a huge role in the success of the Haitian Revolution. 25. The claim that the reduction of profits from the sugar industry led to the ending of slavery is referred to as decline thesis. To which European country was Haiti of importance in 1790s? This would have been France. Many people thought that the Mansfield's judgment of 1772 did what? Alright, we're saying that many people thought that it had abolished slavery within the British Empire, but it really outlawed slavery within England. Wasn't that what the Mansfield judgment did? So we can have a discussion on that. Alright. So remember to, if you have an issue with one of the answers, to put it in the comment section so we can go through it and make any corrections when I see the better answers, right? If you place a good argument, then we'll have to take it into consideration. 28. Maroons were a serious threat to the plantocracy mainly because they served as a constant reminder of the successful resistance to slavery, right? This would be a powerful image going to the persons within bondage, right? That they too can return to a free state, right? That the plantation system and the plantocracy and European slavery, right, was not an undefeated system, right? Or impenetrable or impregnable system. 29. The events which galvanized the support for the abolitionists cause in England were the... So we have Sarah Gill in Barbados, we have Reverend John Smith in Demerara, and we have the persecution of William Knibb. So, which ones would it be? Would it be all of them? I think it could be all of them. Sarah Ann Gill, John Smith, and William Knibb and Thomas Burchell. So if you have a reason to omit one, comment. 30. A factor which contributed to the dismantlement of the British Caribbean slavery was the destruction, protrusion grounds, abolition of the agency committee, anti-slavery movement in the metropole, or break up of the families. So the factor which contributed to the dismantlement of the British Caribbean slavery was the... I think would be most likely C, anti-slavery movement in the metropole. So we're looking at the legal abolition movements, right? So the humanitarians and the legal movements and the parliamentarians that were moving towards the abolition, right? And remember, at this time also, the industrialists would have had a say in British parliamentary life, saying that if we abolish slavery or a transatlantic slavery like this, then we can benefit through industrialization rather than bondage, right? 31. Why did Chinese immigrant women work on the plantations in some Caribbean territories? To earn extra income, to learn about Caribbean culture? Nope. And to accompany their male companions? 1 and 3. 32. The main factor which accounted for the failure of the Chinese indentured immigration scheme in the British West Indies was the small amount of alienation to society, the fact that Spanish it would be the small amount of them that were involved. So they weren't sufficient enough to fulfill the entire role that indentureship was trying to do, right? Trying to get persons back into the plantation system. Here we have now the social situation in the British Caribbean in the 1930s was likened to a pot left on the stove simmering. At times the heat was raised, at times even lowered, but the pot was never removed from the stove. It was bound to boil over. Alright? So we have this statement. Which of the following factors was not an ingredient to the simmering pot? So we have the 1930s depression. We have the state of health among poor people in the Caribbean that was important. The policy of the United States in the Caribbean in the 1930s, or the absence of the right to vote, would probably be the policy of the United States in the Caribbean in the 1930s. Would not have been one of these reasons, right? The Great Depression would have contributed. The health of Caribbean people in poor societies, right, across the Caribbean would have contributed, and of course, the lack of the right of self-determination and self-government and human suffrage would have played a role in the 1930s disturbances. 34. The main economic contribution of the Caribbean peasantry between 1838 and 1860 was the diversification of the economy. Alright, so we have that there. Moving on. 35. The métayage system was a partnership in which the planter kept, profits were shared, peasants provided all the labor, profits were shared between the planter and the peasants. The planter provided land and some labor, planters kept all the profits. Remember the métayage system, they would have a crop, right? The planter would have all that land, right? And then it would be subdivided. So each person would work a piece of land, right? And there would be some pay. The planter will get all the profit, will get all the money, but they will share between the peasants. So C. 36. Which of the following factors created the challenges to the reconstruction of Haiti after the revolution? So there was no French invasion. Political instability because of the situation of two Haitis, right? With what was his name again? With Henri Christophe. It's Henri Christophe? Henri Christophe in the north and Pétion in the south, and international isolation. So 2 and 3. 37. The creation of a just society in Haiti between 1804 and 1825 was hindered by the just society. The establishment of the constitution, how would that hinder? Division of plantations, no. Domination of towns by mulattoes are used to force plantations. So a just society. Forcing would have removed the just society. Alright? 38. Which of the following factors best explains Dessalines' need to swiftly improve the fortifications in Haiti after 1804? It was the imminent fear of French forces, right? So remember that even though Haiti was free at this time, French galleons would sail past, right? Giving this intimidation type of effect, right? So they were intimidating them, giving them a threat of looming French invasion. So they tried to develop these fortifications to defend against that. 39. Haiti's agricultural economy was revived using an agrarian land policy called the Code Rural. So we used that. 40. By the 1970s, the most significant advances in Cuba were in the areas of health and education, education and industrial development, science and technology, or sport and sport will be health and education. All right, by 1970s. 41, which of the following factors best account for the lack of united position by Caribbean leaders towards the Cuban Revolution between 1960 and 1983? Right, so we have here the desire to be aligned to the US. So remember, it was a type of big stick diplomacy where the US would be the policeman of the world, of the globe. So if we have the US with the overwhelming power and military force there, right, it will keep other American nations in line. Remember that the Caribbean is a part of the Americas, North American, right? So we're all born in North Americas, therefore we're North American, we're a part of the Americas. And the US tried the Monroe Doctrine, right, and Manifest Destiny, right? So they were trying to exert their imperial power over the entire area, right? So the desire for the leaders to be aligned to the US really hindered Cuban support. So 42, as part of its post-revolutionary policies, Cuba's assistance to other regions include the provision of medical personnel, educational personnel, and in some regions, military personnel. So we'd say all of them. Some persons would beg to differ about military personnel. Remember, start a conversation in the comment section. 43, the specific action which brought about the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was the overthrow of Fulgencio Batista, right? Cuba's close relationship with China, the installment of rockets by Nikita Khrushchev. Remember what happened there. And then we have 44, which are the following factors accounted for the dependence of the Cuban government on Soviet economic assistance. Right? So this would probably be the economic embargo. So the economic embargo by the US was one of the major traders with Cuba as it relates to sugar and other Cuban tobacco, right? After these embargoes, then most of the sugar would have been the USSR, right? The Union of Socialist Soviet Republics, right? Or Soviet Socialist Republics, yeah, would have gotten most of the sugar and have provided them with the amount of trade that is needed. So that was one of the factors that led to Cuba's dependence on Soviet economic actions. 45, finally, which of the following factors best accounts for the failure of the West Indies Federation? Right? So let's look at this. The unwillingness of the So disagreement among Caribbean labor leaders, the choice of, so we're just looking at it, not saying it's wrong. The choice of Trinidad is interesting. The unwillingness of Britain to give the Federation its full support and inability. So I think it would be C here. Let me just see something. Oh no. It would probably be D. Because even though Britain was the one who was the territory, right, who instituted this type of system, right? But it was all about self-sufficiency. So some person would argue that, because Britain didn't provide enough money and stuff like that, this was a system of self-sufficiency. The Caribbean countries were supposed to pool together, but they were unable, right, to really work as one regional unit because of economic reasons, right? Mostly economic reasons and social reasons, right? So that would have been the paper there, right? So that's the end. Alright, so remember, if you have any problems with any of the answers, please leave a comment in the chat and let's have a discussion.